Hello, and welcome to this episode of Adoption Unfiltered. I'm one of your co hosts, Lori Holden. I'm an adoptive parent, and I am joined by my regular co hosts, Sarah Easterly, an adoptee, and Kelsey Vandervliet Ranyard, who is a birth parent. We are so excited today because we have been talking with lots of people in our advocacy and activism series. We've been talking to birth parents, we've been talking to adoptees, and today I'm so pleased to bring you a couple of adoptive parents who are serving as activists and advocates. So, Sarah, would you go ahead and introduce our guests today?
Yes, I'm happy to. I'm so excited that we have Maureen McCauley and Jessica Davis joining us. This is just quite an honor. Two adoptive parents in our space who are really fantastic role models and have done so much in terms of advocacy and adoption. Maureen is an adoptive parent of 4 children who are all now grown adults and also has grandchildren as well. She has a professional background in child welfare advocacy, as well as executive director of 3 adoption-related nonprofits. She does a lot of work with Adoption Mosaic, facilitating and co-facilitating workshops, lots of really important content that you're helping. And you also have been long running a blog, Light of Day Stories, and just full of information. I get so much just adoption information of what's going on through your blog, Maureen. It's just an excellent resource because you really do stay up on current events and especially international things happening in adoption. So we're just really happy to have you here, Maureen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
We also have Jessica Davis. Jessica, thank you for joining us. I think a lot of us have heard about you because you're kind of a rare unicorn in adoptive parenting spaces and news, being in 2015, realizing that the child you had adopted from Uganda had been trafficked and unlawfully separated from her birth family through the intercountry adoption system. So, you made national and international news then, and so we've always heard of you. And one of our previous guests, Linnell Long, speaks so highly of you and the work that you've done. You've really been a very wonderful and outspoken advocate for intercountry adoption reform, and raising awareness about misconceptions and just kind of the dark underbelly that intercountry adoption often has as a part of it. So you founded an organization, Kugatta, and we'd love to have you talk about that too, and just hear your story as well. But we're just so pleased and honored that you're a part of this conversation today as well.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so maybe we can just start with having each of you explain. I refer a lot to Susan Bronco and Dr. J. Ron Kim's work on the adoptee consciousness model, which has been so helpful. But I've also heard them talk about adoptive parents can come to their own consciousness. And so I thought it might be interesting to have each of you just talk about kind of your awakening to consciousness in terms of, what your story is and how you came to be an activist in the adoption space as adoptive parents.
So you kind of gave a little bit of a descriptor of how we came involved in this realm. Like you said, our family adopted a little girl from Uganda, and she was with our family for a little over a year and a half. That includes the time we were with her in Uganda. And over the course of that time, we just came to realize more and more something was not right with the things that we had been told versus what Namada was sharing with us just as being a part of our family. I was always kind of the approach from day one, like I just wanted her to feel open, like there was no conversation off limits. I wanted her to feel like it was a safe space. Whatever from her history, I wanted her to feel like we want to hear about anything, as much as you want, as little as you want. So she talks about her life in Uganda quite often. And I mean, I would say even daily at some level, we were always like making jokes about things because, like if I would say, no, you can't go outside alone and across the street and down the street for it, she would say, but in Africa, I could do whatever I wanted. I could go as far, I would say, I don't know that I believe you could do whatever you want. And, so it was a daily part of our conversation. But sometimes the things that she would share would give me pause because I was not sure, is this her wanting that to be her story? Is this her story? Because nothing was kind of aligning with what we had been told. And like instinctually, I almost at times would say something, but then I thought, no, I need to just let her share whatever and like me just take it for what it is. And I think looking back, that was the best thing to do, because I think through the work that I do now, I've realized a lot of adoption paperwork is filled with a lot of untruths and lies. And if adoptive parents were to go to their children and say all of these things, it could be very confusing to them, and they could start to believe, is that true? Was that my history? And I think it could get very, very confusing. And thankfully we had not done that, because I feel like that gave her that space to really express exactly what she remembered and express the things that made her sad that she was forgetting, and so on and so forth. So eventually it was one day, I don't remember the conversation prior to it, but she was just like, hey mom, can I tell you something? And I was like, of course. And she's just like, I don't think my mom would have given me away. I don't think she, and she referred to her mom as her mom. It was just like normal. It was just normal language. And I was just kind of like, I said, okay, Mata, well, I'm going to have to I'll look into that. I'm going to figure that out for you. Thinking like, how am I going to figure this out? What does that mean? So that was kind of the start. I had already had questions, but for me, that was like massive. And I felt this sense of urgency and a sense of like desperation, because I didn't know who would help me figure this out. And so we went down this path of me figuring it out. Basically, I had to find this information out. I did contact like the State Department, and, there wasn't much help there in that regard, but they were definitely curious. Like, tell me everything but then like there was no help. I kept thinking everything I would come to them with, I thought they're going to like really care in a way that like they're going to want the same answers I do, because this is a child. And like everybody cares, because that's the whole point of this. We care about these children. But it felt it was more like, just give me the information, and then at least we know that, that kind of thing. Eventually we were able to, I had a friend that I had made while I was in Uganda, and she's now my partner. She does all the work on the Ugandan side. She's amazing. And I just reached out to her and asked for help because I trusted her. And I wanted to see if she would find Namada's mother and just visit. And that was the start of it. Like, I just wanted to see what would happen if she visited. And within 15 minutes of Gladys, which Gladys is a Ugandan, she would not have stood out in the community. There was no reason for this to happen, but within 15 minutes of her being in the village, I got a phone call from our adoption agency. And I was like, wait, what? And it like, I was so like shocked and upset. And the call, and thankfully I recorded that call, because it was pretty crazy, the things that were said. And I just kind of played it off like I was like this really unassuming, naive adoptive parent that didn't understand rules. And like, I didn't know that you couldn't go I just tried to play it off like I was not sure, I was just trying to say hi. And they're like, what? And anyways, from that moment, Gladys and Namada's mother had shared each other's contact information. So not too long after that, we decided, like, we knew now that there were eyes in the village per se, and like, how do we find out the truth? Like, what is the truth? I don't know. So it took a lot of thought, and like, because you don't want to harm anyone or put anyone in harm's way, but you want the truth. How do you find the truth? Eventually Gladys had asked Serena, would she like to do a video call with Namada? And she was within, yes, where do you want me? And she said, why don't we do it in the capital city, but you can't tell anyone in the village where you're going. Like, don't tell anyone you're going to get to see your daughter. Don't get, and she was like 100%, I'll do anything. And that was the day we found out the truth. And it was a really hard day, but a great day. So like, you know, we got up super early because of the time difference. I think it was 3 a.m. and Namada was like scared, I think, you know, and like excited. And so like we see her mom and she's holding like a brand new baby. And I'm sorry, I haven't talked about this in a long time. And like Mada's face, you know, it's like, that's her mom. And this is a sister she's never met. And once we got through like the awkward, like, of dealing with a Zoom for the first time for Mada's mom and all of that, we just got into the like, you know, how, you know, what happened, and getting for Mada to get to hear that directly from her mom and not someone that had went and got that story and then gave it to them in their own light or in their own interpretation. It was beautiful because it was her mom telling her, you know, like, this isn't, I didn't give you away. I was lied to. And, you know, it was a really nice call in that regard that she got truth. It was scary because the whole time I'm sitting here thinking like, what am I going to, how do I, what do I do? Like, you know, this is all messed up. I want this fixed. I want this, you know. And then when we ended the call, Namada started to cry. And then I was like, this was too much. Maybe I shouldn't have like exposed her to something so like emotional, but she was like happy. She said, I'm just so happy. And then she's just like every other kid. So when am I going home? Like, can I go today? Can I go tomorrow? And like happy, like I tried to make that feel just like any other thing, like you would ask for or not. And I just said, I'll do everything I can to get you there as quickly as I can. So then we just hit the ground running, and it was insane and unprecedented. Like no judge had ever done anything like that. No lawyer had ever done anything like that. Our lawyer like went as high as the Supreme Court asking for advice on like how to proceed. No one had any input. It was just basically, let's all just try this, this, and this, and hope I don't go to jail or we can get her home. And that, because like the other thing was getting her home, like just taking your child that was legally yours to another country, even though that's her country, her home. There was like some red tape there that was difficult to navigate, but I was not willing to do it any other way because the State Department said, you know, you can just keep her, like after we told them everything. And I thought, what do you mean? How does that work? What do you mean keep her? Like, you know, I didn't like get her at the, I think I actually said, I think they posted this and more, like I actually was like, I didn't buy her at Walmart. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I was so angry at that moment too, because it was just like, I think a lot of people did not want to have their hands involved in whatever could go wrong. And I understand that, I guess, at some level, but at the other level where the whole basis for what we're saying we're doing, which is helping children in need find safe homes, I like the whole purpose is the child's best need, their welfare. And then all of a sudden that just didn't seem to matter. Like anyone with a child and anyone without even having children would say, you find out that a child's been separated from their family unlawfully, illicitly, whatever. There's no like abuse in this home. This is a loving family. There is no other option but to bring them back together. So that's what we did. We followed those steps. And that's what basically opened the door to me coming into this realm of activism because I also knew in that moment, because while I was in Uganda adopting, I started to notice things that were happening, but I thought what I was witnessing was an adoption agency that was highly regarded and had all of these like high ratings of like ethics and like use this agency. They're like one of the, they're on everybody's site recommended. What I was seeing on the ground there was I thought they were just exploiting people for money. And I didn't think what was happening was, so I just started documenting everything. But because I did that, and then once I realized what I realized with our own case, I realized this was not just our case. And I was like, this can't just be just I do the right thing or I reunite a family and then I go on with my life. I feel a responsibility to expose what I know. And like, because I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't, if I just ignored all the other children, because they all matter too. That's if my whole purpose in adopting was to help someone in need, then I can't stop caring about those people in need when it doesn't fit what I was setting out to do in the beginning. So that's where that all started for me.
Should we end it there? No, I'm just kidding. I'm like, sorry, Maureen. I know Maureen has good stuff.
I know.
I'm mind blown. I remember when this happened and I remember reading the articles and everything, but it is like the larger theme that you just stated, like you don't stop caring about that cause. If that cause is your true cause, you don't stop caring about that. And so thank you for sharing that. I'm just mind blown. You read the CNN articles and stuff like that, and then you're like, wow, that's crazy. And then you kind of go on with your day. But like just hearing it from you is so different. There's so many details that don't make it into an article and a short blip on the news. So Maureen, will you please tell us your background? Because we'd like to know more about what brought you to activism and how you formed that.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you. And of course, I have to start by saying every time I hear Jessica's story, and particularly hearing her say it directly, it's just so incredibly powerful, and it needs to be told and retold and listened to by all of us in the adoption community. So Jessica, I'm really just so grateful that you are willing and able to share your incredibly powerful story. There are many takeaways, but I'll bring it back to myself in a minute. But I think that the takeaway that I want to emphasize is what I see as a tremendous need in adoption policy is the need for truth, the need for transparency, the need for accountability, the need for responsibility. And those are things that we have not really seen in the adoption community the way that we should. And I think that's probably part of what has motivated both Jessica and me to speak out the way that we have. I mean, my origins in kind of the moving toward advocacy and activism came from seeing the experiences of my children unfold as they were growing up. My sons were adopted as babies, U.S. infant adoptions. And then I have twin daughters from Ethiopia who were 6 years old when they came here. Each of them has had a different approach to adoption, a different response to it, a different feeling about it. They're all in their mid, almost late 30s at this point. So it's a fair amount of life experience, but it was my eyes opening slowly from what I had understood about adoption, certainly prior to adopting, and then learning from my children, seeing how adoption, yes, but relinquishment had affected them, how they dealt with different things around our family, how they dealt with friends, how they dealt with racial issues, because my 4 children are Black and both of us adoptive parents are white. But it was really kind of seeing that their experiences as they were growing up. We had lots of love and still have lots of love in our family. And there was also grief and confusion, and it would manifest in a lot of different ways, sometimes on holidays, sometimes if a child was rejected for something at school, if we were late to do pickups, that this worry that we wouldn't show up, a lot of different things like that through over a lifetime. And then doing our best to encourage conversations, that we were open to talking about this, that we were open to listening, and to do our best as non-adopted people to partner with them as best we could, still being parents and holding the power of parents and holding the power as white people in a society that holds white people up, and blending all that in and seeing how this, I know it's a cliche, but this journey of adoption unfolded, and that there were some very, very hard and painful moments along the way that were the direct result of having been adopted, having been relinquished. And so seeing that was really so much of what helped me to realize I need to do more. I hold a position of power in the adoption community. As Sarah had mentioned, I had worked in adoption some 25 years ago, and understanding that we need to shift that balance of power. What adoptive parents have held the mic in adoption policy for years and years and years. If you look at almost every adoption agency is typically run by a white woman or a white man, an adoptive parent. And it's really only been recently that we have encouraged the voices and allowed, in some ways, I hesitate to say that, but I think it's a reality, of adoptees themselves. And we still have, I think, a long way to go to making sure that first birth parents are able to be at the table of any changes of adoption policy as well. It's been a slower process, a much slower process all along the way. I think it will continue to need more of us adoptive parents to say, we can hold our power in promoting the voices of others and in sharing the stories of others, and of saying things like, I love my adopted children more than I can possibly tell you, and things need to change. I work much more in the realm of family preservation and trying to move toward that than in adoption. So that's kind of the quick answer, sort of the long quick answer to it's both the personal experience and then looking at policy and how change absolutely needs to happen in adoption reform.
I just really appreciate that. And before we started recording, Jessica, you shared that you're still in contact with Mata and you still love her. And I think that's a really important thing that you're both modeling, because I think that, and maybe this is a chance for Lori, this might be a Lori question too, but I just think that a lot of adoptive parents are operating from that kind of scarcity and protection mode and insecurity mode. And you're both, what I'm hearing from you is just an expansiveness. It's not it's okay to acknowledge these things, because it doesn't mean the love isn't there, that the love, it might change, it might evolve, but that's what love does, right? So there's just something really beautiful in what you're both modeling. It's not a question, just more of a thank you.
Yeah, I've never personally, I understood that concept of there's not enough room for everyone at the table. Like I don't, I just can't wrap my head around that quite, because I feel like knowledge and access to information and knowledge is just so important to every individual, every human being, especially someone that's been separated from their history. I just feel like that would be even more important. So like, yeah, that's something I'm very passionate about. And that's something I try to do with Kugatta, is if I'm burning more bridges than I'm building with these adoptive families, then I'm not helping the adoptees, which is what I want to do. I want to make sure that if there is any chance at a path, a connection with their family, with their first country, all of that, I will do that. I will take whatever I will. I just feel like it's really important to prioritize that, because for them, that's everything. And it might be the one way that they find out the things that they need to know, and want to know and need to know. Does knowing things fix everything? No, because once that break has happened, there's trauma, and it's there. But we definitely shouldn't just go, well, that's there. This is the new family. That should never be our mindset. And there definitely needs to be reform within the adoption process regarding this. I keep thinking, every time I've, met with the State Department about this, I just don't understand why this isn't a necessary part, not just a suggestion. It should be necessary because, so say you have an adoptive family that has not adopted yet, they're a prospective adoptive parent, they're in the process. You might not know that these are things that you should be thinking about because you're so singularly focused. We're naturally self-centered, or we're thinking one track mind. But if you want to become a parent through adoption, it has to be a necessary part of that you can accept that they have a mother, that they have a father already. Like, you're not ever going to replace those people. Like, you don't replace them. You are just another caregiver that's fulfilling that role. And if that is something that can't sit right with you, I just think that it's a moment that you need to pause and think, should I do this? Because the whole entire premise of adopting a child would be to meet their needs, because the family that they were born into can't for some reason. And we have to be mindful of that throughout their whole life if we want them to ever feel whole. I don't know. So yeah, that's something that I feel very passionate about. And I love when I have or meet adoptive parents that are just like on board with that. It's the best.
I think back in the day, a lot of folks turned to international adoption because they thought there would not be a connection with the birth parents. It just wouldn't happen. And I think they also believed what I kind of call the hallmark narrative, that there's these orphans that are total orphans that have no other options except international adoption. And I think that was something that, that was the myth along the way that we were told. And whether it was with good intentions, nonetheless, the impact, we are continuing to see devastating impact as a result of that intent. So I think and so many things have changed because of social media and because of DNA testing and because of adoptees who are speaking out in a big way, who have moved back to their country of origin. I think of Korea in particular, largest group and oldest group of international adoptees, and what we're learning from them in terms of their reconnecting with their Korean families and Korean culture and language and living there and so forth, and then others who are advocating. And we're also seeing distinct political movements at this point, Western Europe, but many international adoptees who are demanding of their governments, and I'm thinking of Norway and Denmark and Switzerland and Belgium, adult adoptees who are saying, we demand that you look into the fraud and investigate our adoptions, because we think there has been inaccurate information. Whether that will at some point transfer to the United States, I don't know. But there's absolutely a groundswell of movement of adult adoptees who are using their voices and their power to say, wait, I deserve better. I deserve information. I deserve to know. Some of whom have found out themselves, and I think this is increasingly happening as well, adult adoptees or older adoptees who travel to their country of adoption, find out the story that they and their adoptive parents were told was completely false, and learning to reconnect with parents or with siblings who are equally important, grandparents, the extended family, that is in the country of origin, and then connecting with that culture. And that said, it's a very difficult ask as well for these adult adoptees, because there has been decades of experience elsewhere, and the severing of that relationship and misunderstandings and lies and fraud that were told potentially to their parents, their birth parents, it takes a lot to heal and recover from. So I appreciate just all of what Jessica has said and what each of you have said.
I think there's a larger theme at play with just transparency and informed consent. And it's something that we're really starting to talk about in the field of domestic infant adoption where I'm at, something that we're starting to explore. Like you said, Maureen, people wanted to adopt internationally because they see it as no ties, whereas openness was on the rise and domestic, and then that's a big scary thing to people. And so, but then once we realize, and Jessica's story is largely showcasing that there is somebody attached on the other end, just because they're in another country doesn't mean that they didn't have a mom and dad as well. And so this informed consent concept, and we're starting to talk about this more and more. I really pushed it at the National Adoption Conference last summer. Really started to plant the seed in some professionals' minds, like, let's think about this, and I'll be back next year and we're going to dig in more. And I was working with an academic yesterday on her informed consent presentation that she's putting on. I was helping her with it. And she was like, so I struggle with, like, what do we tell birth moms? Like, if you know it, you tell it. If you have the information, you tell it. And same with adoptive parents. If you have the information, you give it. But same with the adoptee, especially with the adoptee. If you have the information, you give it. Because when they find out anyways, and if anyone's like me, I will find out. I will find out. You find out anyways, the feeling, the main thing that you feel once you learn that everybody around you knew and you didn't is betrayal. Rejection, betrayal, everything. So to not give this information, not only this information, like, not only to hide this information, but then to create fraudulent information to mask the truth. Good Lord. I mean, like, the damage that is being done, it is irreversible. It's irreversible, so damaging, so traumatic, so unnecessary. And so, what are we doing? I guess, is the larger question. And I hope that each of us can kind of take that back and think to ourselves on, like, what is it that we're doing here? But I hope that question is swirling in the minds of, like, people that listen to this, including especially professionals. And what is the root cause of hiding this? Is it money? Is it, I don't have any other, I think that's what it is.
Shame, because what we've done is not what we set out to do or what we proclaimed it was. Or I mean, did it even is the root of this the same root that, a lot of us grew up with? I don't know if you guys did. Like, for me, I grew up in a very conservative Christian home, and a lot of the things I went to, even not so in the Christian realm, but like, it was all, I just believed that there was an orphan crisis. I thought there were just children all over the world desperately needing homes. And like, I didn't know anything more to it than that. I just knew the surface level issue. And I even in college had traveled, as part of my college program, I got to go teach in Central America for a while, and it ended up being a school of kids that were called, just considered street children. And even in my mind then, I think back, I was so, like, my prior life experience had me just singularly focused on, like, those poor children needed homes. It did not occur to me that they had families out there that they were separated from. It just was like, they were either like, they had passed away or they had not wanted them. But now that I'm more familiar with the dynamics that happen in developing countries most often that separate parents from their children, it's unbelievable to me that we are still adopting internationally when we know what we know. I mean, I get it if there's a situation that it's desperate and it's necessary, but I find it hard to believe that it would be if you followed steps, because I have yet to meet a Ugandan family that understood what adoption meant at all. It's not a word in their language. So you're just basically describing the word constantly. And even when we do that, we have had families we've been working with for years that still struggle to understand what we're saying. When we tell them the paper that you signed with your thumbprint, that took away you're not the parent, but I am the parent. That they just will, it is so unfair. And then you add in a layer of misconceptions from the Western side and their side. You have the misconceptions on our side that we're not even close to grasping. So like in America, we have Medicaid. So if you're struggling, your family, you can go get food stamps, you can get help. In Uganda, that does not exist. So when I found this out, I was shocked. So orphanages were originally created in Uganda because of that exact purpose. They were a temporary solution when a family was struggling. So and the word orphan in their culture, it only means one of your parents has passed away. Does not mean you're orphaned. So even if at this base level, we're misunderstanding every single element that's happening, and then we're taking them away forever. And like no one's really investigating it. That's another. So in our case, when we went, the process was we went over, and I remember when we first found out there was a living mother, we were concerned. We immediately contacted our adoption agency and said, wait, we just got the paperwork you sent us and it says there's a mother. And she goes, the irritation in her, I'll never forget that phone call. She was just so irritated with us that we were like, it was like we should have just been happy. We've got a packet with a face. And she said some horrible things. I don't repeat them because like they're not true. And I love Serena and Namada's mother. And they were just lies to make you think that this child needed adopted no matter what. And we said, well, we just wanted to know. We thought orphan meant they don't have anyone. You know, she was this was a stage in the process where we should have just realized these are not good people. But like when we complained about this particular person at the agency, we were given a storyline of how her husband was dying and she was not mentally doing real great. And they're just trying, so you're just constantly given these reasons to maybe like, okay, so she's struggling. You kind of press forward. But like, there's so many opportunities for us to realize something's wrong and we're not doing it. Our government, I feel like, is not doing it. So Namada, at the stage of the process after we went to court, so this has all come out in hindsight in our case, the people in the courtroom were paid off by our adoption agency. So the judge was paid off. And so Serena, Namada's mother, is given this in her language, her line, what she needs to hear, how this is family's going to educate your daughter. And she says yes. And we're told she's here just to tell you, please, I don't want my child. It's just so upsetting. So when Namada's mom is at the embassy, which you have to do a final interview before you can leave the country with a visa, and something goes wrong in that room. And my husband and I, we're like trying to figure out what's going on. And we asked the interviewer, what happened? Does the mother like want her child? And he was like, no. Well, when we go back after we got everything approved, we look at the paperwork and in black and white, it said, this mother does not understand adoption. And like the sickness you feel, you're just like, all this time she's been with us, no one ever told us. The UCIS, everybody read that but us, and nobody said anything. Nobody went back after reading that and said, this mom doesn't understand adoption. We need to stop. We need to go. We need to make interview. Not a single person ever spoke to her again until I did. And it's just crazy to me. And it's considered completely on paper, legal and ethical. That is mind blowing to me.
And that's Kelsey's point of informed consent. She didn't know what she was consenting to.
Not at all.
I'm really enjoying talking with you both because you're making me think new thoughts. And one of those is the importance for adoptive parents of alignment. Because so many of us, whether we go intercountry or in country, we pursue adoption to meet our needs to be a parent. And there's nothing wrong with that. So there's that. And then the child has needs too. And the more we can align those, the more the child's needs can be our guiding star. If we're ever faced with a moral dilemma like you were, Jessica, I mean, I know that for everybody listening, you're not the only unicorn who has probably had this situation, but you are one of the only two unicorns I can think of who navigated the morality of that and making sure that your daughters, that Namada's needs were take precedence over your needs. The only other person I can think of is the woman in the King Solomon story who was, tested with, we'll give you each half the baby. And she said, no, let her have the baby because the baby's needs are more important than mine. So I just, those alignments that kind of needs to happen over time as adoptive parents really come into their own on the consciousness of what they're taking on and who is in service to whom. Is the baby in service to the parents, or is the parent in service to the the baby?
And I might add to that idea of the informed consent, absolutely, and the notion of alignment, and also awareness and of curiosity seems kind of a mild word to use, but that adoptive parents need to be more comfortable with discomfort in their curiosity. I think we're going to continue to see in the coming years the role of fraud and in adoption, particularly in international adoption, the role of fraud and corruption and the role of money. And I know people are very uncomfortable with that, the idea of fraud. Adoptive parents don't want to know, understandably, that there was fraud or anything in what they did, because they certainly didn't mean to, yet there we are. The notion, which we've talked a little bit about also, of cultural differences, of understanding of what legal adoption is, its permanency in terms of Western law, as opposed to in many other countries and in places where people are more vulnerable, are not as educated, or do not hold power, are subject to patriarchy. All of those sorts of things mean that informed consent isn't going to happen unless there is a very strong advocate who speaks at least two languages, I would add as well, if it's a country that does not speak English, and speaks two languages well, to really inform, that there's a social worker there to explain to the family that there are child finders still out in the world, who are gathering up babies and children and getting a fee for bringing them into care, into the orphanages and so forth. So the legal and cultural differences are just enormous. And also that I think there's generally been, and I would take this responsibility absolutely on myself, a failure to investigate or at least ask about other options. Did the adoption agency see if there are grandparents, if there's an aunt and uncle, if there are older cousins that could take this child instead? It wouldn't have even occurred to me back in the day to ask those questions, but every adoptive parent, I would say now, particularly those looking for an international adoption, to demand of the agency, what are the other options that you have looked for this child? How have you informed the mother and the father and siblings? And also another part that that gets to me is, what post-adoption services are you going to offer to that family, that birth family? Because all of us, I'm guessing, know that there's virtually nothing that is offered internationally to birth families. Nothing. We offer, and rightly so, solid services we hope people can access for adoptees and for adoptive parents here in the US. What happens to the birth families and the birth mother who has placed a child who is dealing with incredibly significant loss? Nothing. We offer them nothing. even information about what has happened to the child. I mean, I know in Ethiopia, adoptive parents, we were supposed to, when Ethiopia closed to adoption in 2018, but we were supposed to send reports in each year. And the idea was that the birth parents could go and see them. But of course, they were written in English or French or Italian or Spanish or whatever the adoptive parents were. And the birth family might have been hours away and couldn't read in English anyway. So this idea that we are giving informed consent and that we are providing information, we are doing post-adoption services equitably does not exist in adoption policy today. And that's one of the areas I think we have to continue to speak out about.
The families on our program in Uganda, the mothers, we have a grandfather, we have some fathers. I can say from their perspective, there's no consent and nobody's asking for consent. It's basically when they were all approached, it was in a time of need. And basically that was offered as need. They did not specify they all thought their children were coming home. I don't know anyone that does not think that. And they hold into that hope and the trauma and the guilt and the shame, because some of these families, they're in a very desperate place when they're approached, and they might have been told, like, so this American family is going to take your child and educate them, and then they're going to come back. And if you know anything, even in our culture, education is our pathway to, success or, achieving something. It's no different. So they're just like any other parent. This is your only decision you're being offered, A, and B, it's an education, they think. So why would they say no to that? They have no other option, and they love their child. So they say yes. One of the moms that we have on our program, we have not been able to reconnect her with her son. Not that we found him, but the adoptive family is closed off to this. And when I tell you the heartache she feels every time we speak to her, have they said, I can see a picture? Have they said it is heartrending. She is a lovely human being. She is a lovely woman. She deserves to have her son in her life. And it's crushing. She lives with the guilt that she did not understand what she signed, and that she was in such a desperate place that she, you look back and you think, why did I, but I understand why she did it. I let my child go to school every day. Something bad can happen. I try to understand it in a way that makes sense where I'm at. And these mothers and fathers and grandfathers, they're just very desperate to help these children that they love. And then they get in a situation where they're either manipulated, tricked. And like when you mentioned the pictures, it's such a sensitive thing because all of these families would receive these, and sometimes they were used as a tool to manipulate them. Like this, they would say, like, Namada's mom had received a set that they told them that we were still in Kampala, like in the capital city with her daughter, and she believed it. And like she knew of America, but even the concept of us being as far as we were was not something she thought it was like near the capital city, maybe. Like it was not. It's not because she's not intelligent. Serena is very intelligent. She is a very smart woman. She just had never learned that. And it's just upsetting when you think of these things, the pictures delivered, and that's all you get. You have no power. And by the time they realize it, they have no power. They have no ability to do anything.
Just thank you for saying that, because I think too, like when you said that no family you've ever worked with has consented, and definitely not informed consent. I think when we hear stories, like even in stories where they were publishing your story in the news, I think there's an effort to mitigate the alarm and make your story look like a one-off occasion, because and so we see things like sometimes they don't even have a word for adoption. Like these are things we've heard, like sometimes they don't understand where their child is going. But like for you to break it down and be like, she never learned where exactly or how far away America really is, or what that really means, to, you know, terminate your parental rights, things like that. For you to say to me, even, it's even jarring for me to hear, because I know all these things, but then you say like, none of them know. We have a much bigger problem than a one-off situation at this point. And there's such an attempt to kind of like calm everybody down, like, don't worry, this isn't you. And I think that I really truly think that those sentiments in newspapers, like this isn't this could be a widespread problem, but we don't know, is really to maybe coddle the feelings of adoptive parents, and also protect the your reputations and the practices of fraudulent adoption practices by unsavory professionals. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'm even thinking, Kelsey, I mean, it reminds me, I mean, I've had many articles get edited. If I make too sure of a
bold.
statement,
Yeah.
they'll insert the word can be, or, you know, just, you can't get too sure, and too confident. I feel really changed by both of you, just seeing your activism. And, you know, there's a part of me, you know, I came out of the baby scoop era, domestic adoption, but was private, gray market, which as an adult, I came to find out was a coerced adoption by someone who was connected to my adoptive family, the OB, who that's what he did, is arranged and whoever, you know, just brokered adoptions for friends and colleagues who had need of babies. And I think, you know, when you look at the history, the long history, and you can go back to Georgia Tan, and you look at just this is not a new thing, and it just changes shape and form, and until it needs to evolve and go underground to the next area. So I really do feel changed by adoptive parents who care and feel the wrong. I mean, I really felt really emotional when both of you were talking, because I think there's a way that it heals those wrongs, even if they're not the same wrongs, but just that you see it, like, thank you. You know, we don't have to sit in this alone. So I do just want to try not to cry myself, because I do feel just a lot of just healing, just knowing that you're out there and inspiring others. I'm curious how activism in this space has changed you. If you both have thought of that, or if there's ways that that's changed you.
I mean, I've had to look very seriously at myself about the way that I understood what adoption, and again, I say hallmark narrative, you know, that I certainly started out with that adoption was win-win-win, everybody. And so I have had to really take a look at, oh, wait a minute, I can love my children and grieve for what happened. I can love my children and recognize that the process that I went through very naively. I didn't question it. I didn't think more down the line. I didn't think a lot about the birth family. Maybe I thought about the birth mothers, but it took me a while even to think about, oh, and the fathers and the grandparents and the siblings and the cousins and the community as a whole, the aunts and uncles, everybody, that is who the child was removed from. I have done a lot of thinking about the fact that an awful lot of adoptions, and we've mentioned this, are the result of temporary circumstances, and also oftentimes temporary circumstances where money and resources and programs would have made all the difference. Medical attention, medical care, whatever, that sort of thing, all those things in very much smaller doses than, say, the adoption fee that we paid would have meant that children could stay in their original families. So it's been a lot of, for me, it's been powerful. It's been challenging. I've really had to look at things very closely and say, okay, I wish I had done some of these things differently. There's no question. And I cannot change the past, and I can, though, advocate now. And that's probably why I am where I am now, is working through kind of some of that reality. Loving all of my children and my 2 granddaughters, and I'm going to have a 3rd granddaughter in April. So, I mean, those are all amazing and wonderful things within our family, and continuing to advocate for reform and change in adoption policies.
How activism has, like, I guess, changed me. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's just exhausted me a lot, because it's just like you feel like you're just fighting and fighting and repeating and repeating, and you still sometimes feel like you've walked away with, well, but that's not probably our story, or like, I can't convey enough. It doesn't matter what your story is. It's the fact that, like, there is a story, and that we need to recognize there's a story, and that's all. That is, like, that's your child. Like, that's their whole history, is that story. But, like, I remember, just realizing, first of all, that adoption was used, intercountry adoption was used as a tool to traffic the child that we adopted. But beyond that, realizing and accepting and coming to terms with the fact that our decision and our application to adopt literally caused what happened to the very child that we, like, set out to help. And I still live with that guilt. And I think that I don't always, like, do a lot of podcasts or, like, any of this, because it's every single time I have to, like, face it. I have to, like, accept it, and I have to own it. And, like, literally, through our investigation, we found out our application, they lied in the paperwork. So we were able to prove all that, like, they went and got her, they went and found her. So our application, what we were willing to accept, because you have to choose male, female, you have to choose, they went and just found her. Like, if I didn't apply, maybe Mata never would have had to leave her mom, and never would have had to, like, be hurt in an orphanage. And, like, all these people were hurt. I'm so sorry. It's just so upsetting, and it keeps happening. So it's like, maybe it's happening less because there has been reform, not enough. But I think it's going to be really hard to convince me that there wasn't something that could be done to keep a child in their family. I mean, I can only speak maybe to Uganda, just because I have more experience with their program and the families that I know. But I can't imagine there's not something that we can do for each of these families that would have kept them together. And, like, once that sever happens, it's just really hard. We just had Kugatta, this just before Christmas in November, we got to have our first symposium where we called it Family Preservation Symposium. And every family on our program, we paid to bring to the capital city, and we had speakers, and we had a doctor present. We had, like, anything we could think of that met any need, a therapist present. There was a therapy session, and also opportunity for anyone that wanted to speak got the opportunity to speak. And there were things that they shared, that the family shared, that they'd never shared. We've been working with them for years. They just felt so much power for the first time, like, to say what they felt. And Namada spoke, which I had no idea it was going to happen, but she spoke about her time in the orphanage, which was really, really upsetting and frustrating. But her plea was to all the parents there: don't send your kids to an orphanage. This is what happens. This is what they do to you. This is what they tell you. This is how they hurt you. And, it's just, until someone tells you, you don't learn. And, we think that we're doing something good in the world. And that was kind of like, I hate that. I hate those words, but we have to be honest. Like, that's kind of like where my heart was. And it wasn't that we wanted to, like, be a parent. We were parents. We really I wanted to do something good, especially maybe for the most vulnerable, you think, child. So that's where our mind went. And what we ended up doing was more harm. because we didn't really understand the problem. We didn't really understand why children were separated from their parents. We didn't really understand why these orphanages were lined with children. Well, they were lined with children because of a lot of Westerners giving donations to orphanages. And they realize when they're filled with children, they get bigger donations and consistent donations. And, you know, we're just creating this circle and cycle of like separating families. So there's really a family separation crisis in our world, and we're just kind of ignoring that because I think it's a little scary to accept and confront and realize we have a part in it. Like, you cannot give money to orphanages. Like, you see the video, you see the pictures, you want to, but if in doing so, we are causing more children to go into orphanages or keeping them in orphanages. Like, you know, invest into family preservation work, and if it's not work that's keeping families together, then you're probably doing work that might be separating families. And you know, we have to like accept that, if that's so. For me, that was where activism had brought me to, accepting my own complicity and acknowledging it and continuing to, because if I stop doing that, maybe another adoptive family will think I can just look the other way, or I can just, and also maybe letting them realize that once you accept it, it's not that bad. Like, yes, you have to live with the guilt of it. Yes. But like, it's just accept it, like own it. You know, the whole world doesn't crash around you. It does in some ways, but in other ways, it's a little bit empowering because you've owned it. You don't have to hide. You don't have to pretend, you know.
I think it's also the idea of owning truth rather than owning fraud. And that's part of it as well. And that can be a painful process, I recognize, but that's part of it. I'd also note, and you mentioned this, Jessica, certainly the role of money. We really need to have some really difficult discussions about the role of money in adoption generally. Who has it, who needs it, who keeps it, that the role of money is just astonishing. And if I were to, you know, with adoptive parents, I would also recommend that they listen to the increasing number of adult adoptees who are speaking out. So it's not just us adoptive parents, and I know there aren't, you know, too many, perhaps, like there are some, but not too many, like Jessica, and to say, well, listen to the voices and the wisdom and the lived experience, and there's a variety of adult adoptees, and that's hear them, because their voices are going to be like your children's voices. And we're seeing increasing numbers of estrangement in adult adoptees with their parents. You know, I'm talking full-grown adoptees who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, who are estranged because, whether US or international, because of incorrect information, inaccurate information, inability to ask for the truth and to sit with the truth and the discomfort. And that I just, and there's stuff that's hard to take, I get, but it's so important for us to listen to adult adoptees, and absolutely to birth parents, first parents as well. They're so marginalized, and we need their stories, and we need the reality of their experiences, and we need to have them, as we've said, at the table for any of this. If real change is going to come about, and if children's needs are genuinely going to be met.
You've both given us and our listeners so much to digest and to think about when it comes to not only our personal adoption stories, but activism and advocacy for what's right.
Just in my work, a lot of times when I need constituent support for a bill, when you talk about the most credible, quote unquote, credible person in the eyes of Congress or state legislatures, they want to hear from adoptive parents, right? And so, but the trick is that it's the hardest to get them to talk a lot of times, because they feel guilty, they feel they may be fearful, and some are utterly frightened, in the sense that if their adoption has just occurred, that they may be scared that it will overturn. So when I'm trying to get them to say, okay, let's get some perspective here. I need you to tell your story, but I also can't just say that, right? What wisdom or advice do you have for adopted parents who are scared, but they know it's the right thing to do? Like, how do we get them over that?
Are you meaning just to speak out, like not, just to tell their story?
Speak out, but also put their story in the right places. We have a lot of opportunities for adoptive parents to use their stories. And sometimes I approach them knowing that they would be a great voice, and they say, I'm too scared.
Well, this is frustrating, but this is the truth. Like we had every bit of proof that our adoption was completely fraudulent, and not a single person cared enough that was going to enforce us doing what was right. So if that's going to put their mind at ease, no one is going to ask you. I think probably the greater fear beyond that is public embarrassment or people calling you out, but like at some level, like you're going to have to take that. And it just is what it is. But you're not like going on Facebook and posting this, you're going before. So I think at some level, they're not going to face anything besides their own mirror, because like no one, and people we should have been like, oh, this is what happened. Okay, so you're going to have to do this. There's not any of that. And, actually, when I was in the process of, we had uncovered the truth, my gut instinct was, if I'm the only one involved in this, no one's going to care enough. So that was part of how we did get the FBI and the government to actually, I feel like, step in eventually. We didn't know when they did. It was kind of like, they don't report to the people, this is the investigation we're doing. But I eventually got a lot of adoptive families to share their story. But that's what I felt like I had to kind of, I don't want to say promise them, because who am I? I couldn't promise anything, but I gave them that, assurance that no one is going to take your adopted child away. No one is going to. It was a little frustrating at some level, because I'm thinking like, I wish they could hear how that sounds. That's your greatest fear, is that they don't get to go back to the birth parent. I mean, it's so callous to that parent that has literally lost everything and will never get a voice and say. But at the same time, like I said before, if our goal is to help adoptees have that connection, we have to be mindful of the people that have the power in this scenario, and that's the adoptive parent. So I would just make sure that they do know there's literally nothing at this point in history that's going to change anything. Just the fact that maybe it'll stop it from happening to other people.
Well, and I want to add too, Jessica, like, to that point of, there's probably no one you have to answer to, but you do have to answer to your adoptee someday when they grasp this and they understand. And to your point, Maureen, with estrangement, like that's a big, that's like, you want to do right by that adoptee.
Not going to feel good.
Their lifetime. Yeah. And then you're leaving it to them to have to unpack that and reconcile and forgive or not forgive, but have the cleanup from that. That is not okay. I think the other thing that I was just thinking of is, I think a lot of it, we're all, I do a lot of studies with the Neufeld Institute, and Dr. Gordon Neufeld always says we're all creatures of attachment. And I think that it's a fear of separation from the adoptee that's driving adoptive parents to be scared, to not look at the truth, to not go deeper. And it's that fear, but, let that fear, look ahead 40 years, 20 years, 30 years, and let that fear drive you to do the right thing. And I think, there's respect that comes with that. I mean, you both have children who still, they see what you're doing, and they see what you've done, and there's still, the attachment holds, whether the adoption holds or it doesn't hold, or how that shakes out. But when children feel that you love them and you're looking out for their best interest, no matter the cost to you personally, that's felt.
Absolutely. I think there's also this idea of planting seeds. That's something that's a metaphor these days for me, that I feel like, okay, I'm planting seeds. I'm not maybe changing somebody's view from this to this, but I'm planting a seed that maybe is getting them to move a little bit further over, at least say, oh, huh. And I think podcasts and conversations and the Adoption Unfiltered book, all of that also adds to the community and the community of voices that says, okay, there's some hard stuff here. And we've lived it and we've experienced it and we've gotten through it. And it is so much better to live in the truth without the secrets and lies of the past, or with the inaccuracies. Once we found the truth, we'll look for the truth. Once we find it, we'll live with it. It's going to be hard, and we're going to go through this together. Because, and I think your point, Sarah, really, of that the needs of the child who grows up, and we always want to keep adoptees as 6-year-olds, but I mean, adoptees 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, and we're still adopted. That we acknowledge that the journey is complex and that there is a lot of mess in adoption. And despite the fact, the idea that it's just happy and everybody's happy and it's all a good outcome, there is that, and there's this other part that is much more complex. So I think it's the planting of seeds, it's the acknowledgement of love that is a part of a family, and how, in Jessica's case, how that love manifested. That love absolutely manifested in making sure that Mata could grow up with her family, and exploring the fraud and the coercion and all of that we need to do all of that. And we need to create a community where people say, yeah, this is the reality. It's kind of tough, and we're still hanging in. And I hope, Kelsey, you get more advocates going. Over 30 years ago, I was living in Maryland at the time, and I and one other adoptive parent was on the side of at state hearings about narrowing the period for revocation of consent by birth parents. And I think it was going, they wanted to move it from something like, 30 days to 5 days or something like that. 30 days is not, that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, that the fact that two adoptive parents were speaking with the birth parents really, really affected the way that the legislation, and they did not shorten that period for revocation of consent by a birth parent. So we do have a lot of power to help still, and I think we need to continue to use that, because some things haven't changed in these 30 years. And we need to do it in community. We need to do it with each other, and we need to be together as adopted people, as adopted parents, and birth first parents, because it's not going to work otherwise. We're not going to do right by children otherwise.
So this is a formal invitation to any adopted parents listening. If you would like to use your voice and support the Federal Adopt Act, which would prohibit unlicensed adoption intermediaries in the United States, you can come talk to me, because I will help you get in the right direction. So, Lori?
Great.
Yeah, I'll make sure that there are lots of show notes on how to reach Kelsey, how to find more information on Jessica's nonprofit. Is it a nonprofit or your advocacy organization called Kugatta? How to reach Maureen and how to learn from her and her advocacy, and also always information on Sarah. Plus, we interviewed Catherine Joyce, who was the author of The Child Catchers, in a previous episode, and so I'll make sure that that is easy to find as well. Jessica or Maureen, do you have any closing thought that you'd like to say, Jessica, first?
Thank you guys for asking me here today. I haven't talked about this like in this type of setting in a while, as you can tell. I really apologize for how emotional I got at a few times.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing it with us, because it drives home how interconnected and interinvolved we all are in how things are and how things need to be. So
Yes.
Thank you. Maureen?
Yep. Yeah, and I just want to say that in your tears, Jessica, that's the emotion that we need to hear. It's genuine and it's true and it's needed. And I really appreciate the fact of everything that you have said today and the message that you are sharing and wanting to reach out. And so I would just say to other adoptive parents, try to work through your fear, try to listen to others, try to do what's best for your child. And it's not easy. I'm not saying, I've hardly been perfect in the way that I've done it. And I own that way up front. I've made loads of mistakes and I want to keep going because I think that's what our children and all children deserve.
That's so well said. Sarah or Kelsey, any last words? Okay. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it, rate it, share it wherever you listen so that you can help others find Adoption Unfiltered. As you can see from this interview, it's through healthy engagement that we can make the changes needed for all of those affected by adoption. Visit adoptionunfiltered.com for our other episodes and more information about our other projects, including our book, Adoption Unfiltered.